All right. Welcome to our weekly Thursday night New York Giants Preservation Society Zoom meeting. Tonight, we have a great guest, Perry Barber. I have a lot of things to talk about before Perry gets on, and some people who are here are going to say a few words as well. First of all, Steve Rothschild, happy 74th birthday yesterday. Many
Thank you.
Happy birthday,
Yeah,
Steve.
happy
birthday.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Let me just hit some more people.
You.
Oh my God, Eve Cox.
One more year and he can get his vaccination. One more year for his vaccination.
No, I got one already. I got a second coming. Diane Barish. Oh my God.
What are you?
There is
Hey,
one.
Diane.
Wait 1 second. If this person is here, yeah, there's one person I have to say special hello to. But anyway,
I really appreciate you talking to me because you don't know me.
happy birthday again, Steve.
Thank you.
I heard from Steve Treader.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I can help.
Unmute.
Hold on.
Somebody's got some interference.
Oh,
Yeah,
Daniel.
somebody's talking on the
I'm
phone.
trying to
Daniel, what's the matter, Sharon?
Good.
Who is that?
Okay. I heard from Steve Treader, who spoke earlier in 2020. His Horace Stoneham book will be out in June, and he is going to come aboard and speak about Horace Stoneham, and this time his book will be available. All right. I updated. We have 2 pages: our Facebook page and the regular Giant
See you
website,
right next to me.
New York Giant website, and I updated that, made it a little more up to date, I guess. Everything's straight on it. This is going to be one of the logos we use on that one. That's different from the Facebook page, just to have a little bit of different quality to each one. But it's a nice design that my daughter came up with, and I really like it. So we're going to use that.
Very nice.
All right.
All right.
Schedule.
Fred Collins here.
Schedule.
Yeah.
Eve Kofsky, are you here?
I'm here.
Eve?
Here, Gary.
Eve, I cannot thank you enough for being here. Eve is a friend from 45 years ago, and I love her. Eve, thank you so much for coming. She's a big
It's a
baseball
pleasure
fan.
to be here. It's a
Thank
pleasure
you
to
for
be
coming.
here.
All right, scheduling. Next week, we're going to have a giant hot stove meeting, San Francisco. Anybody is welcome to come. I don't know how many people, but like I was telling some of the other guys, every day I'm seeing transactions, and none of them are too uplifting in my eyes. And hopefully something will change soon. On February 18th, we have Dave Lippman, the team that nobody will forget, 1951 New York Giants. On the 25th, we have Jerry Eisenberg, a wonderful sports journalist who most of you might know from Sports Extra here in New York.
Well, yeah, he hasn't.
We're going to be celebrating Monty Irvin's birthday, and he's great friends with him. So that'll be great.
When is that?
That is the
February
25th.
25th.
Yesterday, I added on March 4th, we have the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame in the museum, Tim Mead, will be speaking to us.
Oh, my.
So that'll be a wonderful thing. It'll be a giant thing, but more or less other things going on in baseball. You could ask anything you want. He is not in charge of inducting people, so just take that into consideration. Dan Taylor is coming back on March 11th. He has a new book about the Hollywood stars. On March 18th, big talks about Giants and Dodgers rivalry, and I was able to land Carl Erskine.
Yes.
Wow.
He is 94 years old. He lives in Indiana. He is very nervous about going on Zoom, that he won't be able to do it, but I will
Top
work
left.
with him prior to that, and hopefully he will be on. And he is, what a nice man. I spoke to him
He
for
is
quite
very
a while, and he's a really nice man.
New York Giants Preservation Society.
What day is that again, Gary?
I'm sorry? That
What
is
day
going
is
to
that?
be March 18th. Is Jay Rifkin here tonight?
He just left. I saw the name just left.
Okay, let me see if he's here. Jay is celebrating a birthday soon. His son runs some kind of trivia contest, and he wanted to know how you guys felt about doing a New York Giant night on here. And I think it'd be really nice. It'd be something different. So, and Alex Drude, who spoke, he has something to say about his book. Alex, floor is yours.
Thank you, Gary. This will be real quick. For those who were here last week, I do appreciate that. Hello, Fred. Hello, everybody. I forgot to mention, I recently found out the book has been nominated for the 2021 Larry Ritter Award, which goes to the best dead ball era book.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. I'm not sure I submitted the books correctly, so I don't know if everyone got them. Who the hell knows?
It's a Saber Award.
Yes, it is the Saber Award. So that will be announced in March. So obviously I will let you know. Awesome with that. I also found out there's actually film of the New York Giants. There was actually a serial made at the ballpark in September of that. And I'd considered buying the film before, but I think I will do that because now we have people who I can show it to, and it won't just hide in my cupboard for weeks on end. So I will get that, and at some point, Gary, we'll figure out. We can watch the little clip. We can figure out how to share screens and all that. So anyway,
Sounds great.
that's my bit.
That's great honors for you, Alex. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
Gary, can I just, before?
Yeah, go ahead,
you put-
Steve.
Yeah, I
Only
just,
because yesterday was your birthday. So.
No, it's all right. Ed Logan, we spoke about your dad today. Gary was nice enough to give me Carl Erskine's phone number, which I used today. And I spoke to Carl Erskine. It was unbelievable. 94 years old, married 72 years. I'm sure many of you know that they raised a Down syndrome boy named Jimmy. Not sure. I'm pretty sure he passed away, but he certainly lived to at least 50.
No, he's living.
He's still
He's
alive.
living, I think. Yeah.
Well,
And he had a
he
good
was
job.
working at some job in 2011, but Erskine, like Gary said, he's a little concerned about the Zoom thing. And I told him today not to worry. And then I said to him, can I ask you a question? You struck out 14 Yankees in a World Series game in 1953. You can't do Zoom? And his answer was different skills. Oh, it's very cute.
It's true.
What a wonderful guy. And, you know, he's the last one from 51, like Mays is with the Giants. And I had a friend that I was with whose father knew Carl Erskine's first baseball coach in the minor league. So they spoke for a while too, but he's going to be a lot of fun. He will be a lot of fun. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. Jay, can you hear me? Jay Rifkin? You're on mute, Jay. If you want to give your spiel for a minute. Oh, well.
Unmute, yeah.
Jay, go ahead and speak.
Yes, yes. Can you hear me now?
Happy birthday,
Yes.
whenever that birthday is coming up.
Yes,
Go ahead, Jay.
okay. All right. I just wanted to mention to you guys, there's something that I wanted to bring up that maybe you guys would enjoy. My son started this past summer doing a online trivia, and he does, you know, everything from pop culture, which is movies, TV shows, music, and he does sports and whatever. So what he and he's been doing it, it's really spread. He's been doing it to all kinds of groups all over the country, from libraries to corporate to everything. So he mentioned to me this past weekend, he said, you know, your birthday is coming up. I'd like to do a trivia for you and friends. And I said, well, I don't know if I have any friends that would really be into the trivia. However, I do have a group of guys and gals that I meet with 2 or 3 times a week, called the New York Giants Preservation Society. And would you be able to do like a New York Giants trivia from, let's say, 1901, 1957, or it could be other years? So my question is, how do you guys feel about, you know, doing a trivia? Is it something that you would, you know, really be interested in? Because what I don't want him to do is to spend hours of his time coming up with this and, have only like 5 people on here. So do we, what is the reaction? I'm on my iPad and I have had trouble with it, so I really can't see. Oh, share screen. Okay, well, all right. So anyway, so my question is, how do you guys feel about doing a New York Giants trivia? Would that be something that would interest you? That would get you on and we would get like the same number of people that we normally get? If not, again, I don't want him to kill himself and have only a handful of people on. So,
You know what? It might make sense, Gary, if one of your emails ask for a reply.
Yeah, I actually think that, I think it'd be a great idea, but I also.
You'll get people.
I think maybe you should encompass the whole franchise. It might draw more people. So that's just my feeling. But I will send out something and hopefully we can get something done, Jay, okay?
yeah, all right. Let me know. Right now it'd be 19. Well, since it's a New York Giants Preservation Society, 01 to 57. And
Fine.
see if, and see what kind of response and let me know.
Got it. Thanks so much. All right, why don't we start
Okay.
tonight's program?
Hey,
Perry Barber.
Gary,
Yes,
Gary,
I hear you.
before you start, I got 2 things. Number one, I'd like to recognize the passing of Wade Terwilliger, and the number of New York Giants shrinks by 1. Mo Resner, who's on here, I think you knew him, right, Mo?
No, not really.
Okay. Billy
Not
Gardner.
really.
Well, he died. He was 95 yesterday, and that was it. He was a Dodger and a Giant, among other things. The other thing I want to mention is that on May 4th, will mark the exact 150th anniversary of the first professional baseball game, as most folks recognize it, played in Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Cincinnati Red Stockings.
with the Cleveland Forest Cities against the Fort Wayne Coquiangas. And Deacon White got the first hit of Bobby Matthews, a double. And May 4th is the 150th anniversary. I don't know if I'm going to do anything. It's 3 months away.
Thank you, George. All right, let's get on with tonight's program. I met Perry Barber in 2005, 2006. Her, me, and Mo Resner were compatriots in another group that all 3 of us were actually kicked out of. Perry's laughing.
We're such troublemakers.
We were such troublemakers that we were given the boot.
Didn't like the pizza.
We didn't like the pizza. Anyway,
Or the tepid coffee.
so Perry and I had developed a nice friendship. She came to my school and she was a judge in a trial that I sent to you guys out earlier in the week, which is typical because she was an umpire and still is an umpire. So Perry Barber, the floor is yours. Welcome to our presentation tonight. Good to see you, Perry. Floor is
Thanks,
yours.
Gary.
I
Thanks,
can't see
everybody,
her.
for being here. Mo,
can't-
well, I can see you.
Oh, all right. That's good enough. Oh, no, not,
There's a little group of squares, tiny little squares that says, what does it say?
Full
It
screen.
opened. Yeah, thank you. Full screen. And it opens up all of the people that have called in to the Zoom. So it's on mine. I have a Mac. It's on the left side of my Mac. I don't know what you're using or where it would be on yours.
I can't find it.
All right. You know what she looks like, Mo. Perry, floor is yours.
Mo, if you can just visualize, and Gary is recording this, so you'll be able to watch it in living color later on if you so desire, okay? But as long as you can hear me, it should be okay. I'm just gonna rip through a bunch of pictures. So thanks, Gary. Yes,
I
I've
just
been
finished up.
umpiring.
Nice guy, worked with him before. No, I got the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting in the
Hold on, let
background.
me mute.
I mean, who are these people?
Yes, if you would all mute yourselves, that would help. Because I'm not going to be taking questions while I'm talking. I'm just going to be riffing through a bunch of photographs and explaining them basically for about the next 10, 15 minutes. And I'll be happy to entertain questions after that if you like. So in the meantime, it helps cut down on the ambient noise if you all mute yourselves.
Harry,
So
I gave you the,
just
Harry, I gave you the square share screen whenever you need it, okay?
okay, great. So thank you, Gary. I have been umpiring for 40 years. Well, it would be 41 if I hadn't taken last year off because of the pandemic. I worked my first games of this year a few weeks ago and realized how sadly out of shape I am after not umpiring for a year. Because believe it or not, umpires actually do move around. It is a very physically demanding thing to do if you're doing it correctly. And that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about umpiring. So I'm just going to be talking for a few minutes about my umpiring career and the parallel storyline of my devotion to the New York Giants and particularly Christy Mathewson. And I will start sharing my screen in just a moment. Connect to one.
For those of you who've been to the Hall of Fame, that picture of Perry is in it, so with the mask on.
Oh, sorry, I have to do all of this rigmarole signing in. I thought I. This is the first time I've used this PowerPoint program. Okay, I think it's going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, share screen, open in Zoom. And
Hey, you look great.
thank you, Mo. So do you. And I'm very happy that you're staying healthy out there on Long Island.
Yeah.
So,
Perry, you're all good.
okay. Okay, how do I open this, however? No, that's not it. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, there we go. Okay. You all recognize that lovely face. Is my audio okay? It sounds
Yes.
a little weird. What?
Now it's good.
Okay. All right. So the New York Giants, Christy Mathewson, and more correctly, but I like the alliteration. So it's the New York Giants, Christy Mathewson, and me. So let me figure out how to, here we go. So for those of you who are in or around New York, is that what it looks like right now? Because I'm down in Florida where it went down to a positively frigid 40 today. And I'm feeling sorry for myself, but is that what it looks like up where you are, Gary?
Well,
Yeah, my screen.
the screen looks black, so it's kind of dark
Oh.
outside too, but there's nothing on the screen.
Oh, wait a minute.
Nothing on
Start
the screen.
slideshow. Okay, hold on.
Now it's white
I
like
s-
snow.
Now it looks like the snow.
Well, I pressed start slideshow and my screen went white too. So let me find out what's happening. So, forgive my inexperience with this program. Okay, try it again. This file will be shared in Zoom through a shareable link. No, what does that mean? Share screen, open in Zoom. So I'm just gonna start talking while this is doing what it's doing. See if it starts. Well, something's happening. My iPad is vibrating. Oh, come on. Here we go. Okay. Can anybody see that? Does anybody see anything?
No, it's black.
Oh,
It's black. Let's see. Start slideshow.
Why don't you just start talking?
Just give me one more try on this. See if I just need to sign in.
When it was black, there was an indication on the bottom that said 1 of 79.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it had arrows. Maybe you needed to click on the arrow.
Okay, I'll try that in just a second. I'm signing. Oh, wait a minute.
Perry?
Yeah.
Andy
Yes.
Baumgarten, for some reason, your enter password is coming in on my screen.
Screen.
Commenting on all.
Mine
of
too.
them. Don't worry.
Mine too.
Oh. Okay.
I don't want
well,
your password. I don't know what to do, though. Oh.
Hi,
Just
Andy.
don't do
Long
anything.
time
How have
no
you
see.
been?
I'm fine, thank you. I've managed to stay healthy relatively. At least I haven't gotten COVID.
You know,
It's great to see you, but this is weird because it has your, I don't see your password, but it has your email on the top. And as you
this is
type,
not a
it's
good
typing on
thing.
my screen. I don't know why.
What if you talk without the pictures, maybe?
Barry, now you're muted.
Who's that?
I said, just give me 1 minute. I'm going to sign out here and sign in on my other device and then just do this in a low tech kind of a way. So hold on. I'll be off screen I'll be out of touch for about 30 seconds. So I'll be right back.
That went away.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Hopefully we'll get everything straightened out with her.
Gary
Yes.
and Freer. Trivia question. Carl Erskine, what did they call him in Brooklyn?
Oisk. Is that what they called him? OINSK?
Brooklyn Dodgers had a pitcher named Wade Hoyt, and the headline in the Brooklyn Eagle the next day was Hurt Hoyt.
For those who came in late and didn't hear, our lineup is going to be again next week's going to be a hot stove. On February 18th, Dave Lippman. February 25th, Jerry Eisenberg. March 4th, Tim Mead. March 11th, Dan Taylor, and March 18th, Carl Erskine. And we will go from there. We're all pretty much booked up till April. So
Okay. Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay, you can't see me though, right?
No, we see a picture. We see a picture of the umpire mask.
Now you see my green screen?
Yes.
Switching around. Okay. So I'm just going to do this very simply and hold up pictures to the camera so you can see as I tell you what's going on. Is that going to work for everybody? Can you see? Let's see.
Yep, that works.
That was Christy Mathewson. That was good.
Yeah. Okay. I have to do this here. Okay. So I fell in love with Christy Mathewson when I first started learning and reading about baseball when I was 27 years old. That was 1970. My math is 1979, 1980, something like that. Okay, let's go this way. Sorry. Oh, okay, I got it. That was the picture I wanted. Oh, finger keeps hitting the wrong button. Sorry, guys. Okay. Is that what it looks like in New York?
Yeah.
No, more snow.
Not really. It looks a lot worse than that.
No? Okay.
Think of 2 feet.
All right. So I'm going to start the story of my life with the obligatory nude photo. This is me and my twin sister, Warren, who, when she grew up with me, turned out to be my very first steady umpiring partner, because nobody in the umpiring association that I went to work for would umpire with me for no reason other than that I was a girl. So my sister stepped up to the plate and she became my first steady umpiring partner the summer of 1981. And we worked the Indio Little League together. So which one is me? Does anybody know?
The one on the right.
I have no clue. I'll take your word for it. Okay, here we go. This is us. A little later on, we were little princesses. We grew up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in a relatively privileged milieu. We went to private school in New York. Oh, darn it. I'm going to learn to do this way. This is us with our mother, Jacqueline. Now, Jacqueline is the reason I umpire, because in 1981, she suggested to me that I start umpiring the Little League out in Indio, California, near where she was living in Palm Springs. So that's why I started umpiring. And to this day, I don't think I would have ever thought of doing it on my own if she hadn't suggested it to me. So she really changed my life in a big, big way for, you know, for the next 41 years. So that's my mom. Okay. This is my mother and father. My father disappeared when I was 6 years old. He took a boat on the Atlantic Ocean, never to be seen again. So I grew up in a primarily matriarchal household, and my mother was a very strong and excellent role model. That's my father, who was a pilot in the Korean War. And I don't think he liked coming back to New York and working in a shipping company. That was the family business, was a shipping company. And like I said, I grew up in a fairly privileged way. This is my brother, my sister, and me looking like little Lord Fauntleroy and his little princess sisters in front of our building in New York. And I actually still live right there behind those windows that we're standing in front of 67 years later. Or I don't know, I guess we were about 3 when that was taken. So this is my sister and me. We were about 10 years old there, and we're wearing what are called dirndls because my mother married a Nazi, and I'll get to that in just a moment. This is my father, my biological father. Again, his name was Larry Barber, and he was the scion of a shipping family in New York, just sort of like the Steinbrenners or something like that. And the little flag that you see there is the Barber Burgee. It's the pennant that flew from the ships that we had roaming all around the planet. I went on one of our ships to Japan when I was 6 years old, which was a lot of fun. We went through the Panama Canal and around up to San Francisco and across the Pacific. It was great. So very, very special and fortunate way to grow up. Yeah, my mother, after my father disappeared, dated a guy named Sonny Lombardi, who worked at the local Cafe 72, run by mostly neighborhood Goombas, who always had great tickets to the Copacabana. So that's what we're doing there. My brother, sister, and me are there with Sammy Davis Jr. Yeah, they got us great seats. Oops, what happened? Oh, okay. Oh, that's easier. I got it. All right, here. So I mentioned that my mother married a Nazi. She actually did. And when she found out that she had married a Nazi, because he hadn't told her before he married her, she went to court in New York State and got the marriage annulled and set a legal precedent doing it, because up until that time, concealment of a heinous crime was not sufficient grounds for annulment for some bizarre reason. But she made it so that it was ever after that. It's called the Barber precedent. So my mother was a pretty kick-ass lady. Didn't take anything from anybody. I probably get my take no prisoners attitude from her, my mother Jacqueline. So. My sister and me, we grew up very happy. You know, we spent summers in Massachusetts, going up the hill to pump water from the neighbor's house and hanging out with the birds. And that was our cat when we were kids. We had a lot of fun, but never thought about umpiring or baseball. I didn't come to love baseball until many years later. Here I am wasting my youth playing pool at the Bitter End, I think, one of the clubs in New York. And there I am. What is that? Oh, that's my first band called the Offbeats when I was in high school. So yeah, I led a double life in high school. I was a pretty good student, but I would slip out and sing doo-wop on the corners with my band, and go to the Bitter End and shoot pool. So I was pretty wild for back then. There's me looking intently, wondering what customer I'm gonna take, probably. Okay, this is, what is that? Oh, sorry, didn't go all the way. Seems to be stuck. Hold on. Okay, I think we got it. No. Well, even the low tech isn't working now. Let's see. Maybe I can. So basically, I spent my youth after high school. I dropped out of college very early on, came back to New York, started playing guitar in the clubs and boîtes around New York, and didn't really have much ambition to do anything or become rich or famous. I just wanted to have fun and make enough money to support myself, which I managed to do. Although, frankly, I was very fortunate. I didn't always have to depend on my, the income that I earned to have a roof over my head. So when people think of umpires, major league umpires make a pretty decent living, but umpires who do what I do, which is high school, college, adult leagues, youth leagues, international baseball, we do not make a lot of money. We get paid a game fee, and a lot of times we don't get expenses. So it's a very dicey proposition to do what we do the way that I do it. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to get this back. Oh, password. Now you can't see me typing in my password, right?
No.
No.
Okay, that's good. Not that I'm worried about anybody impersonating me, although somebody did buy $100 worth of Nintendo games using one of my credit cards the other day, apparently. And I had to cancel it, which is a pain in the rear, but better than running up a huge bill. So while I'm trying to get this back, I'm looking for my Google password. Hold on.
Harry, I think your story with your words is probably much more important than pictures.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want you to fall asleep, everybody.
Well, the,
So I started umpiring in 1981 at my mother's suggestion. And because none of the other umpires out in India would umpire with me, I called my sister who was living in Los Angeles, and she came down to Palm Springs, and she and I were a crew for that entire summer, just she and I. And the very last game we had, Leo DeRocher came over to us because he was friends with, I guess, one of the league officials, and he was there to hand out the awards at the end of the season. And oh, my sister and I kicked an infield fly terribly. And I was just waiting for him to, raise a ruckus about it. Because at that point I was pretty knowledgeable about baseball. I hadn't known about it for very long, but I had been reading very studiously for a year. And that's all I did really was read until I started going to games in 1979, 1980. And I went to see both the Yankees and the Mets because I had to make up my mind as a New Yorker which team was going to win my loyalty. And of course, the Yankees at the time were coming off that, streak of 3 or 4 postseason appearances in a row, and were great, had great players, Reggie Jackson, Greg Nettles, all those guys, Thurman Munson. And the Mets, of course, were dismal, but they captured my heart, and I bestowed my affections upon them, where they have remained, even though I've been lucky enough in the ensuing years to actually umpire a lot of spring training games for the Mets. And that was by virtue of persistence. Yeah, all right, Mindy, thank you. Because I didn't ever get anything umpiring wise handed to me on a silver platter. That's for sure. I had to fight for every game I got, especially for the first 5-10 years, because I was met with a lot of skepticism and disdain and, outright mockery. And it could have been very discouraging, but because I had sort of intuited that that was going to be the case, that even as much as I had come to love umpiring very, very quickly, that I knew it was going to be a long, treacherous road to hoe, because that's just the standard thing that umpires have to deal with, is hostility and lack of a friendly demeanor directed at us, and being blamed for everything that goes wrong out there. So I recognized that early on, and I decided if I couldn't get a support system, I was going to make one of my own, because I knew that I wouldn't make it without one. I mean, it got really bad. My second Little League game, the coach waved his players off the field. He would rather have forfeited the game than let me umpire for his kids. And it was probably the first time in my entire life that I had ever stood my ground, because of the way I was raised, as forthright and take no prisoners as my mother was. I was not that way at all. I was just always pleasant and amiable, and I wanted people to like me and think I was charming. But that doesn't work on a baseball field. I found that out the very first game. And by the second game, when the coach started waving his kids off, and I wondered, oh, now what am I going to do? I did something that up until then I never would have done. I stood up for what I did was I stood up for the kids, because I went over to the coach and I said very loudly, hey, the parents all brought their kids here and they really want to play. So if you have a problem with me, complain to the office after the game. But right now they want to play. And of course, the parents were all listening with interest at this point, and I sort of had gotten them on my side, I think, even as skeptical as they were as well. So anyway, it was not easy. The first 5-10 years, I was met with a lot of hostility, criticism, naysaying, why are you doing this? Questions that men would never get asked. I mean, if you think about it, nobody ever asks a man, how did you get interested in baseball? It's just sort of assumed that from the time they're in utero, that men are inculcated with the baseball culture and the idea that baseball belongs to them and that they belong to baseball if they want to. For women, it's completely different. And a lot of these issues were things that I never ever thought about until I started umpiring. And it was like getting cold water thrown over me. And frankly, I'm glad that I did. I'm a very different person now than I was when I started. If you
Harry,
can imagine.
Harry, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, yeah.
Is there a turning point in your umpiring life when maybe a manager cursed you out and you were like, hey, I belong now because of all of the managers cursing out the male umpires per se? Was there one specific moment that you felt I have arrived?
No, I don't really remember anything like that. It was just a progression of days and weeks and months, and my seasons began to be 10 months a year because I would go out to California, I'd come down here to Florida, I'd go out to Arizona to umpire in the wintertime when it was too cold to umpire in the Northeast. So I that's all I did. 10, 11 months out of the year was I umpired. And when I say umpired, I'm talking about 10, 15 games a week, sometimes 20 games a week. One game every weekday, a high school game, a college game, some other type of game, an adult game out on Long Island at 6 o'clock, something like that. And then on the weekends, like a lot of umpires in my position, I would work 3-4 games on a Saturday, 3-4 on a Sunday, and go home, pretty exhausted. But I was young and sturdy back then. And it takes a lot out of you after doing it for 40 years. I found that out last January when I dove back in head first without testing the waters first, and realized that if I don't keep moving around, which umpiring requires me to do, I get, stale and sore, and my feet were hurting like the dickens, man, and my knees and everything. Umpiring is not an easy thing to do. It's physically demanding, and I know that may seem peculiar to some of you who have never umpired or never really paid attention to umpires and view umpires as kind of fat slobs who stand around on a dime and blow every call they make or have the opportunity to call. But that, frankly, is a myth. It's a very poor image of umpires that's somehow been magnified and amplified beyond recognition. And those of us who do, and I am guessing that probably everybody on this Zoom knows an umpire. Even if you don't know an umpire, you probably do, because there's somebody within your circle of acquaintances and friends who has a son who umpires or umpires, youth ball on Saturday afternoons himself. And now, thankfully, a lot of women are starting to umpire too, which in this country is a big thing because we lag very far behind other countries in the recruitment, training, and promoting of women umpires. I wonder, does everybody here realize that there's going to be a woman officiating in the Super Bowl on Sunday?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, her name is Sarah Thomas. Well,
What about your relationship with Christy Mathewson?
okay, so I just fell in love with Christy after reading about him. I'm not really sure why. I just did. There was something about him that appealed to me, and I just became incredibly devoted to him. And when I started learning about the Giants' history, And of course, learning about his role in the Merkel game and the replay game after that in September of 1908, where he pitched valiantly but lost to the shenanigans of the Cubs, who cleverly put in the starting pitcher for, a third of an inning or something, and then he was allegedly hurt and they took him out, and Mordecai Three Finger Brown was untouchable for the next 8 innings, and Matty only gave up 4 runs, but it wasn't good enough. But things like that just really struck me and made me realize what an incredibly interesting, complex, and decent man he was. There are so many stories about him. He was a checkers master. He didn't pitch on Sundays because he made a promise to his mother. And all those things that I learned about him just drew me to him. And, I don't want to say I loved him like with a lust kind of love, but, just with a devoted kind of love and a desire to learn as much as I could about him. Kind of like I do with you, Mo, or you, Gary, or you, Lee, or, a lot of people. I like to be engaged and get to a deep level of relating and communicating with people. I don't like wasting time on unnecessary niceties or ceremonies or fakery, anything like that. And that's what I always thought about Christie.
What
Yes.
about the 1905 World Series where he had 3 shutouts against the Philadelphia Athletics?
Yeah. If I had,
Unsurpassed. No one has ever done that again.
no, and yeah, probably nobody ever will, because they won't get the innings, like Snell last year. So,
Yeah, if anybody has any questions about
Perry, when you did,
or umpiring, fire away.
Perry, when you did the spring training games, what kind of a pay scale would you have been on?
the Mets, and anytime I work spring training down here, whether it's minor or major league spring training, they pay really well. They used to just give me an envelope full of cash. I mean, seriously, and say, here, you distribute it amongst the other umpires. Now it's all by check, and everything has to have an IRS form and all that nonsense.
As opposed to when I saw you at Chase Field, you were doing some kind of a tournament.
Right.
So who paid for the rental of Chase Field, and how did you get paid for those games?
Oh, well, that's an organization called Play at the Plate, run by a guy named Scott Green. And those are a lot of fun. He stages tournaments in major league ballparks all over the country. I've worked at Wrigley Field and PNC Park.
Chase.
Yeah, Chase, Target Field in Minnesota, and Chase. And I got to tell a quick story about working at Wrigley Field. They had us on a very tight leash when we were there. The Cubs people did not want the ball players there to play, or the umpires wandering around at will. And they put me in this dressing room that I was told was the visiting manager's dressing room, which was down this long sort of walkway to the visitor's dressing room, which in order to get to the facilities, the sinks and commodes and showers, you had to walk all the way through the dressing room to, and go around kind of. So anyway, I'm in this dressing room and I'm looking around, and it's like a little ante room, and somebody's been using it sort of as an office. And then there's a middle room, like a little walk-through area, and on one wall is just a lone sink. And then I turn around and there's a shower stall, and I'm saying to myself, there's no toilet in here. And then I'm thinking, holy shit, Christy Mathewson probably took a piss right there, and his DNA is still on that wall, because he would not have wanted to walk down that long hallway and go to the, just to take a leak in the actual bathroom. I guarantee you they would have stood right there. Huh?
You told that story when Joe Mock was here the first time. I don't know how it came out, I guess
well,
you
you
saw
know,
Wrigley Field and you
hey,
you
I'm
told that
67.
story.
I forget which stories
No,
I've
that's a
told.
good story.
So.
Crazy, yeah.
But yeah, I think about that a lot, that I was that close to Christy Mathewson's DNA at Wrigley Field, because he was the manager, right, in 1914. He managed the Braves that year, did he not?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
So,
Perry, when I was the Giants bat boy, one of the jobs I had to do was give the new baseballs to the umpire. You know, they have it in those little pockets.
yeah.
And
Ball bag.
those guys were, I was afraid of them. They were the old guys, really gruff, and they were even older than the baseball players. So I wish you would have been there. You would have been a lot nicer.
Ah, believe me, I'm not that nice when I put on the uniform. I'm pretty much all business.
Yeah, I've seen you at, I saw you at Chase, I know. Whole
I'm not
different
there to make
personality.
friends, even though
You're all changed.
umpires actually do make a lot of friends, believe it or not.
Harry, do you feel that the umpiring has been dumbed down, based with all this reliance on instant replay, that they just kind of make calls for whatever they think because they know that the play is going to be reviewed?
I don't feel that way at all.
No,
I don't think any self-respecting umpire walks out there nonchalanting it, or not putting out his or her best effort.
I
We
don't
don't
mean
want-
that. I mean, they're trying their best. I totally get that. But in the back of their minds, are they thinking, hey, if I got it wrong, get it wrong, it's going to be shown?
Well, I think most of them would prefer not to be shown to be wrong, first of all. And second of all, most of the umpires that I know that I've spoken to about using replay, and I've spoken to major league umpires who use it the way that they do, and a lot of Atlantic League umpires who use the robot umpire using the earpiece in their ear to call the pitches, which is the newer technology. Most of us don't mind technology when it helps us get a call right. But what we object to is when it takes as long or longer than the original decision-making process would have taken anyway, and reverses us. But that doesn't really happen very often because the preponderance of evidence has to be on the side of changing the call for that to happen. So frankly, I'm not 100% sold on either replay as it's used in the major leagues, and definitely not on the robot, the earpiece, because I saw umpires working calling pitches that were in the dirt strikes because the earpiece said strike. And they had no recourse. They had been instructed they had to call what this thing said. And I remember one umpire got into a fight with, who was it? One of the bigger name coaches for the Atlantic League, and wound up ejecting him and looking terrible that he did it, even though he's perfectly justified, because unfortunately he allowed the manager to walk away as the manager was saying something, like the magic word or something. And the technique when that happens is for the umpire to say, hey, you blah, 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 and re-engage the manager so that he turns around. So then it looks like the manager has said something that is justifiably ejectable. But if he's just walking away and the umpire tosses him, it looks like he tossed him for no reason. And you don't want to invite that kind of criticism. I mean, we leave ourselves open to enough of it as it is, even when we perform perfectly. But little tricks and techniques like that really make a difference in the standard of umpiring and the perception that people have about an umpire's capacity, to be good or not.
Thank
So yeah.
Harry, you talked about doing spring training games with the Mets.
Uh-huh.
When you first did the first handful of those games, I know in spring training you've got some guys that are not major league umpires as well, whether they be from the minors or for college or whatever. But the ones that were the major league umpires, when you did your first handful of spring training games, what was their reaction towards you being on the umpiring crew as a woman?
I wouldn't wind up working with any of the major league umpires because the games I get during spring training are either intra squads or split squads, which are the B games. They're usually the games that the team stays behind, and then, you know, the big name players go somewhere else. So I seldom would work with other major league umpires unless they were retired. And I worked with a few that I just called them and said, do you want to work some Mets games with me? And because, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of them didn't get the pay that they do now. And so they were glad, you know, to get the money and the opportunity. And, you know, I never met with too much resistance. I think right off the bat, they had respect for the fact that I had graduated from Harry Wendelstedt. And probably a lot of them knew that, you know, it was not a joke to me, or I could get the job done, as we say in umpiring. So I never met with much resistance from any umpires that I worked. There's always, you know, one or two jerks and, you know, guys that would say, I'm not going to work with her for whatever reason. But
You ever work with Pam Postema, I believe?
I
her name
did.
is?
I worked with her at an amateur tournament out in Columbus, Ohio, a long time ago, after she had retired from pro ball. And to me, it was not her lack of skills that kept her from being a major league umpire. It was a number of factors. The primary one being that her lone rabbi, the one guy that supported her, that really wanted to see her make it, that was Bart Giamatti, who at the time was the commissioner. He had a heart attack and died before she got promoted. And once he shuffled off his mortal coil, nobody else gave two hoots about Pam, and she became disposable because another woman went to school in 1990 and graduated and got a job. So Pam's usefulness had been served. She had been in pro ball for 13 years and they didn't want her progressing beyond AAA. That was apparent. So to me, it's a travesty and, you know, one of baseball's blots, black marks, but
Do you
baseball has a
foresee
lot of
day when
those.
there will be a female umpire in the major leagues?
Well, there are two in the pipeline right now. Of course, with the pandemic and no minor leagues last year, and who knows what's going to happen this year, it will probably be at least 5 or 6 years before we see either of them, even at the AAA level where they get the vacation games when the major league umpires go on their nice 6-week vacation during the summertime. So, but it's going to happen. It definitely is. There are other women behind them that are supposed to be in pro ball right now, but because they went to school in 2019, in January of 2019, there was nowhere for them to work last summer. So they're still waiting for their first pro assignments. So hopefully there will be 4 before very long. But the 2 that are already in there have the best shot right now of making it. And for them, it's going to be, like I said, at least 5 or 6 years, unless, you know, somebody decides to get smart and say, hey, look, you know, we're not going to penalize them for something that was beyond their control and fast track them a little, which has happened to plenty of male umpires. There are lots of umpires that have skipped AA, gone right from single A to AAA, or, you know, spent fewer than 4 or 5 years in the minor leagues. The average time is 7 to 8 years. That's how long it takes for umpires to gain the experience necessary to umpire at the major league level.
Are you surprised that you don't see more females going the independent league route?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head right there. Why is that? Well, why do you think it is? Does anybody ever say to you, hey, do you know any girls or women that would make good umpires? Let me know who they are and I'll train them and get them assignments and start them on their path to the major leagues. Does anybody ever say that to you or anybody? I doubt it. And like I said, if my mother hadn't said to me, for some unknown reason that I will never understand, she just connected some dots that I would never have thought of connecting. But if she hadn't said, I think you should go umpire for the Indio Little League, and I looked at her like she was out of her mind, and I said, why would I want to do that? And she gave me three, what she thought were very reasonable answers. She said, well, you love baseball, and you wrote a song about an umpire. And I said, yeah, but I write songs about drunk idiots too. And she said, well, I saw you reading a book about umpires. And I said, well, you've seen me reading books about serial killers. And she said, well, I just think you would, she said, I think it would be fun. And I think what she meant was, I'd been visiting too long, I'd overstayed my welcome, and she was trying to find a way to get me out of the house so she could have some peace during the day. And my very first game, when I was met with an onslaught of vitriol and hostility, literally right in my face for the first time in my life, instead of, crawling into a corner and crying and thinking there was something wrong with me, I just felt like it was so interesting, like it was a puzzle that I wanted to solve. This profound mystery of human nature and what drives people to behave the way they do, especially when they put on a baseball uniform. It transforms them into infants and they think that they're entitled to behave like temper tantrum throwing 2-year-olds. And me, I like adults. I like a game that goes smoothly without any unnecessary blips and bumps. I don't like to eject people summarily. I like things to just go nice and easy and for everybody to have fun and everybody to stay safe. And that to me is an umpire's most sacred charge, is making sure that conditions are safe and that everybody is safe and that nobody gets hurt.
Well, we had the one gal out here, Shannon Easton. Know
Yeah.
that name?
Yeah,
She
she
did
was
the
the first
NFL, but she
NFL.
did it during the strike, and
Yes.
she
And
did some Division II college. She kind of retired. She runs. She's
did
the
she?
assigner now for the Charter Athletic
Okay, well,
Association.
good for
I've
her.
worked for her
So,
for a bunch of years.
good.
Have you had any contact at all, interchange with Ed Hickox, who lives in
Yeah.
Sun City Grand?
Sure, yeah,
He lives
I
in our
know Eddie
community.
quite well. Huh?
He lives in our community. In
Yes,
Sun
I
City
know.
Grand.
And his baseball odyssey is so unique. His and Phil Cuzzy's, both he and Phil got fired in that misguided mass resignation in 1999, and they didn't get their jobs back when they wanted to. But they both exacted promises from the then the commissioner of the minor leagues. I think, what was his, or no, it was the major leagues. What was his name? Leonard Coleman. That they would be permitted to try to work their way back right from.
He did.
And they did. They started at the bottom in single A, and Eddie continued to teach at umpire school. That's how I
Yeah.
know him.
He gave some
And
lectures.
he's a great guy. And so is Phil. Phil was my classmate at Wendelstedt, 1982, 83, 84, 85. And he came this close to not, actually, he came this close to getting kicked out of school his first night there. So I kind of saved his ass by fibbing a little bit to cover his tuchus, shall we say. And I think if it hadn't been for me, he would have been sent home. So Phil Cuzzy owes his major league career to me. And at some point I'll get him to pay up.
Well,
But he's a
Hickox is
wonderful
the
guy.
only
He
major
raises
league
money.
umpire.
I'm
to
sorry?
umpire. Hickox is the only major league umpire in history to umpire a no-hitter at each position.
Really? Now that's a very, very good trivia
He
question.
used that
Umpire.
trivia question here. Nobody could figure it out. And finally somebody said, it must be you. He gave out
Right.
4 tickets to a Diamondbacks game.
Unbelievable.
Right. Every
Harry,
division.
Harry,
Yes.
do you still wear number 10 in honor of John McSherry?
On some occasions I do. The college association for which I wore that number, which was John's association when he was a college umpire, and is the reason why I wore it in his honor. I don't belong to anymore. I haven't worked college ball, organized college ball in about 7 or 8 years. I still do it down here in Florida during the spring, just kind of pick up college games because a lot of schools that come down here in March to play.
Harry, if the NBA and the NFL has already had women officiating in regular season games, why is there a 5-year ramp up for Major League Baseball?
Yeah, good question. It's because by the time referees and basketball and football referees get the call or get promoted to the top level, they already have the experience working college ball and, the minor leagues of basketball. What do they call them? The D leagues or?
D-League.
Yeah. And football, there are other similar type. It's not a farm system like baseball has, but they get the experience before. And a lot of them come from the college ranks now. So they are trained more intensively than baseball umpires at the same stage of their path to the major leagues. That's probably why. And like I said, there's no shortcut to the major leagues. It takes a long time, not just to learn the intricacies of, what to do and where to go and how to deal with people at the different ballparks and things like that, but the skill set that you need for each succeeding level of baseball as the players' skill sets pick up and accelerate. And it's a rude awakening for a lot of umpires. I worked my second Mets game that I worked in 1985. I hired a friend down here that I worked high school baseball with, and I thought he was a pretty good umpire. And he was the first base umpire. It was just the two of us. And the second play of the game, a batter gets a base hit and goes tearing down the first base line, swinging around the bag towards second. And there's Rich coming in to do what we call making his pivot on the infield to be ahead of the runner if there's a play at second. And he got knocked flat on his keister. He just ran right there because he didn't realize the speed of the runner. And so forever after that, when I have spring training games that I assign umpires for, I tell the first base umpires, I say, look, you cannot wait. You got to get in there or you will wind up flat on your rear and it will not be fun, because getting plowed over by a major league ball player, it's like getting run over by a Mack truck. So it's a whole different thing, and just very, I don't know, it's such a rush, such an adrenaline rush to be participating in something like that. And it's a very zen activity for an umpire, even while the blood is flowing and things are going fast. And but it's just such a wonderful thing and a way to learn how to be focused and centered and not let outside distractions deter you from staying focused. There's so much about umpiring that's invisible that a lot of people miss when they think about what umpires do out there. And those are the things that have always fascinated me and that keep umpiring such a challenge for me, even now, 41 years into doing it. There's always something that I learn. If you pay attention and don't put up a barrier to learning, especially when you make a mistake, there's so much going on that that I feel has enriched my life and my understanding of myself as a person and of other people. And those are skills that I can translate into my daily relationships with people who are not in a baseball uniform. Thank God. Because when they put on the knickers, man, they turn into, sometimes it's pretty shocking what they think they can get away with. Grown men.
Andrew Parnell, you're up.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Thanks, Gary. Perry, I've done a little high school and just kind of rec league officiating myself, and I've experienced there's a lot that goes on in the kind of behind the plate. Do you have a favorite memory or story, relationship with a catcher or a hitter or something that just really kind of sticks with you? Kind of just a good memory or example of
Yes. In 1985, when Gary Carter I think he was pretty new with the Mets at that point, and he caught one of the early games I worked during spring training, and probably about the third or fourth pitch that came in, I heard him say in a very low tone without looking back. So nobody except I could hear him, except me could hear him. And he said, "Hey, Perry, you don't want to miss those good strikes at the knees." And I said, "Okay, Gary." And who was it? There was another guy, Barry.
What?
Lions.
Barry
Dwayne-
Lyons, that was it. He was a
6:30.
backup catcher,
Stop at 6:30.
and one time he was catching, and I think my very first game he was catching, and a pitch comes in, and I call strike, with all my verve and enthusiasm. And I hear 3,000 groans from the ring of people around the old Payson complex in St. Petersburg. And I guess Barry could kind of hear me, sort of mumbling to myself. And I leaned over and I said, I do mostly college baseball. That's not a strike here, right? And he goes, "Not a strike." And after that, it wasn't a strike.
Not a strike. So Perry, when you call balls and strikes, do you do it, nice and clearly? Because over the years, I'd be darned if I can understand half the umpires. They grunt or they use their hand, or, maybe it's because of TV, but it's not clear.
Some of them, yeah, do have a bit of a shorthand, I think. But no, I'm pretty readable. I like to, be clear and make sure that everybody knows what I'm calling. So I wouldn't say I'm flamboyant, but I'm very actually no frills. I don't like, frills and bows and gussying it up, because to me that wastes a lot of time. I like basic fundamental, keep it moving, batters swinging the bat, staying in the batter's box, and umpires calling as many strikes as we can steal, because that's what moves the game. Who wants to see a batter standing up at bat, ball, 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 ball all day? It's boring. And
is it tough on your voice at 9 innings?
Very seldom does it really affect my voice. More likely my knees or my feet at this point than my voice.
How many times have you been hit by a ball?
Oh, if I had my thing working tonight, I had a little mini gallery of my war wounds, and I've been hit a lot. I've had fingers on both hands broken. I've been put on crutches for 2 months. Yeah, umpires take a lot of physical abuse. It's not easy, but it's just part of what we have to deal with out there. And most of us.
Taken out of a game because of that?
What?
Were you taken out of a game because of it?
Once I had to quit in between games of a double header because my leg was so swollen and sore I couldn't walk. I got hit by a foul ball, and it just even right through my shin guard. I thought my leg was broken. It hurt so bad. And yeah, I was on crutches for a couple of months after that. But the only other time that I've ever had to quit was the summer of 2018 during the Women's World Cup in Vieira, Florida, when I made the huge mistake of accepting a small glass of freezing cold water because it was 100 degrees in the shade where I was working on this field in Vieira. And I just chugged it down. And a half an inning later, I had to run through the dugout because I almost puked in public, but I made it to the tunnel at least, and they wouldn't let me go back. I told them I'm fine. It was just a momentary thing, but they wouldn't let me go back. So
you know what, Perry, you'll attest to this. Nobody comes to watch the umpires.
What?
Nobody comes to a game to watch the referees or the umpires.
That's not true. I do. And if anybody goes with me.
Because you're a referee and an umpire.
Too.
I do the same thing. But most fans, they come to watch, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle.
That
the
is
umpire
very
just happens
true.
to be there.
But if they go with you or me,
that's a different story. You analyze,
they usually
right?
leave saying, wow, I saw something I never saw or thought.
What game is he watching? What game is she watching?
Right.
Well, the old adage is if you know the umpire's name, they did a bad job, i.e. Angel Hernandez and Country Joe West.
Yes.
Okay, well, they take a lot of abuse.
So what about your equipment over the years, Perry? Was it designed for female or?
No, And that is a big problem with women umpires even now. There's only one uniform supply company that makes anything even remotely in our size, and we don't demand a different cut or a different style. We just want pants that don't make us look like clowns and shirts that don't make us look like clowns. And if they're too big or they don't fit properly for some reason, that's a big strike against us. And we have enough strikes against us just walking out there. If we don't look professional, businesslike, ready to, get down to brass tacks, people look askance right away. And that's something that we definitely want to avoid. So there are quite a few women that have banded together to importune this company, umpire.com. And Jerry Davis is also the other big supplier. And I've been after him for 10 years, just get pants in a size 32, with a 30 inseam, because we don't have the package that guys have. And, when we wear their pants, we look silly in them. And, I wind up spending at least as much on tailoring my pants and my shirts as I do on the shirts and pants themselves. And as far as chest protectors and shin guards go, there's a similar problem, although we have learned how to deal with it by using a heat gun or a blow dryer to shape the molding or to fit us. And there are lots of chest protectors you can buy that are too big when you put them on, but they have removable Velcro straps. And so by the time you get everything off, they work. But some chest protectors, I can't wear. What Joe West makes a chest protector I cannot wear. It's just too bulky and uncomfortable for me.
Do you ever use the big, huge balloon chest protector that
When
they
I
used to
first
use in the
started.
American League?
And I wish, believe me, I wish we still did. Those things were like, the rock, the wall of Jericho. Nothing could get through.
Why can't you still use that?
Well, most leagues don't permit it. I know the Pro Ball doesn't permit it. I think it was, who was it? Bill Clem that started getting away from using the outside protector, and it slowly disappeared. I think the last umpire that used it might have been George Maloney back in the 1980s or something. But I used it when I first started, and I only learned to use it when I went to umpire school the next January to learn to use the inside protector. And back then, for women, it was a very dicey thing for me to find something that I felt comfortable in, because the shoulder guards cut down on your ability to move up here. And, not that I can throw that great anyway, but,
Hey, Perry?
Yes. Who's?
I'm curious. I wanted to find out your perspective as being an umpire. What comments or any comments you have on the Posey rule?
I never really understood why players were allowed to lay catchers flat. It always bothered me seeing the peril at which they placed themselves, and the resulting physical harm that some of them suffered because of it. So I'm all for it. I mean, I don't think it, pansies up the game or takes away anything from it to ensure that a player remains healthy, and especially now because they're making so much money, clubs have a vested interest in making sure that they stay healthy as long as possible. So I'm all for it. I don't like seeing players get hurt, and I'm all for it. And because in college and high school, we have even stricter rules about running into players, even at second base on a steal or something. Players are very restricted as to how they can make contact with an infielder. And to me, that's fine, because really, baseball is all about adapting to change and new guidelines, and incorporating, a new way of thinking about that is a good thing. Fewer players get hurt. And to me, that's really important. So I I believe in that rule. Yeah.
You know what? If you go the other side of that rule, and Harvey Weinberg will certainly back me up, I'm sure he's heard this. Willie Mays many times was interviewed. 62. If Matty Alou would have hit
Oh,
the
yeah.
double and Mays was on first,
Yep.
there was no way he was stopping at third. He was
Oh,
quoted
yeah.
as saying, "Me and Elston would have had a good time at the plate."
Hey, you know, and Stephen Perry, I do recognize and keep an eye on good umpiring. One of my favorite umpires was Steve Palermo.
Oh, he was the best.
He was the best.
He was.
Uh,
Everything about him just
and I got a
admitted
chance
his love for what he was doing.
in 1980. I had the good fortune with one of our sons to be seated right next to the Yankees dugout, and it was a hot Sunday afternoon, and he was the home plate umpire, and it was just I was more interested. And the Yankees had Reggie Jackson, and Frank Gifford was sitting in front of me, but Palermo was he controlled the game. His balls and strikes from where I was sitting, I could tell he didn't miss a one.
He had it all, man. He could do it all.
I saw that there was
He
one
so
game
smooth out there
on TV. The Yankees were playing Cleveland. Stump Merrill was the Yankees manager, so you could figure when this was. And Don Mattingly hits a foul ball, and the first base umpire, I don't remember who it was, calls it a home run. It's not a home run. There are no replays, but you could see it's not a home run. Mattingly
was it
runs
Frank
it out.
Humont?
Mattingly runs it out, and Steve Palermo waves it off because he's the home plate umpire. And Stump comes running out of the dugout, and I'm getting close to the TV because we're going to have a good moment here. He's probably going to throw bases and whatnot. And Palermo, you could just see on television. He explains to him what he saw, and Stump does a 180 and walks back to the dugout. You could see how he was respected. On the
Yeah,
field.
he was a cool customer. He really was. And
Harry, when you were having your technical snafus, Harvey actually was paying tribute to you. Harvey, you had something on before.
Oh, hold on. Yes. Now you got to.
Harry, you were not watching, but everybody else was.
All right. Now, why do you have a mask, Harvey? Are you?
Why do I have a mask? Because you got to wear a mask. There's a pandemic going on. You need.
Okay, I got it.
No, this is one of my sons who's yet to clean out the house, and he played every position.
Okay.
It's interesting. When I coached one of the kids in Little League, one of the things that the Little League did was they required the coaches to umpire at least one game not involving your team at first base.
Good.
To give you an idea of how difficult it was
Exactly.
to call a game. And this was just a Little League. But I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Can I
Umpiring is a religious experience.
It is. Can I tell you one quick story? Did you know, you probably know Brian Gorman.
Of course. He was my classmate at umpire school too.
Okay.
And
Did you know his dad
used to give me a hard time. Tom Gorman, his dad.
Okay, a
used
real
to
quick,
give me a hard time.
very brief story. Somewhere in the early 70s, my wife and I were on vacation in Montreal. The Giants were playing a 3-game series with the Expos. So naturally, we wound up going to a couple of games. And the first game, the umpires' uniforms had not arrived. So they were wearing makeshift uniforms and the equipment from the visiting team, which is the Expos. My wife and I enjoyed it. We got a little bit of the French connection, so to speak. And we went to the first 2 games, And we decided not to go to the third game. On the afternoon of the third game, we were sightseeing. And we were at the old expo. And who do I see alone waiting for somebody? Tom Gorman. So Helen and I walk over to him and I introduced myself, and he was so pleased that I recognized him. And I said, of course I recognize you. And I told him I was a Giants fan. Helen was a Mets fan. She, of course, volunteered. She grew up a Dodgers fan. So Tom Gorman says, are you planning to go to the game tonight? And I look at Helen because she really didn't want to go to the game. And I said, well, we really weren't. He says, why don't I leave you 2 tickets? So we're not going to turn down 2 free tickets.
Wow.
So we go to the will call gate, and he says, I'm going to leave it in my name. So we go to the will call gate, and I say there are 2 tickets in the name of Tom Gorman. And it was a lovely woman behind the cage, and she's looking through a stack of tickets, and she can't find 2 tickets in Tom Gorman. And I said, the umpire, Tom Gorman. She says, oh, you mean the referee? You know, with the French accent. I still have the envelope somewhere. And it was wonderful. Now, the last part of that story I'm leaving out, he was waiting for his son, and it had to be Brian.
Yes.
And this was 70s, so you could figure out, you know, how old he was. He said his son was coming up from New York. But that was Tom Gorman. He became my first favorite umpire on that day.
Oh, he had some famous feuds with Leo DeRocher back in the day. There's the story that they got into a contretemps, and Leo started kicking dirt, and Gorman started kicking back, and all of a sudden Leo realized Gorman was wearing shin guards and he wasn't. So he was getting the wrong end of the stick on that one.
Jay, you're up, Jay.
Yeah. So just to get away from umpiring for a moment, in your bio, it said that you were a Jeopardy champion at one time, and also that you opened for Springsteen and Billy Joel and Hall & Oates. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But
yeah,
all my life I've done my utmost to avoid getting a real job. So after I dropped out of college, I became an itinerant troubadour, singing around the clubs and caverns of New York. And I got lucky. A couple of agents saw me playing at a place called Max's Kansas City, and they sent me on this circuit. It was called the College Circuit, where I would be the opening act for some pretty well-known bands. And this was 1974, 75. And Bruce Springsteen had one album out, and he was a cult famous, but not, hugely famous the way he became later on. And I opened 3 shows for him back then, and a couple of shows for Billy Joel and a bunch of other pretty well-known artists. And I had a lot of fun. I was not ambitious at all. I just loved to write and play and hang out with musicians and not have a 9-to-5 job. So that's what I did. And in between times when the gigs ran dry and I, suffered a bit of impecuniousness, I would solidify my bank account with forays onto quiz shows. Jeopardy is actually not the only quiz show I've been on. I think I've been on 5 or 6 in my lifetime, and I've won money on all of them except for one. Although when my twin sister and I were on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, we walked away with 6 figures, but unfortunately 2 of them were on the right side of the decimal point, so doesn't count. After taxes, I think we each split like $450 or something. But it was a great, I actually got a book agent out of appearing on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So there was that. But I was on the original Jeopardy with Alex Trebek when I was 19 years old. And I was the champion against adults. And 40
one-time champ, Perry, or you won?
One-time champ. I went back the next week because I taped the last show on a Friday, and I went back the following Wednesday and went down the tubes. And then 17 years later, I got back on the Alex Trebek version. And again, I went down in flames because they had completely revamped the buzzer system. And when you see people going like that, that's because they buzz in too soon. And then they do what's called locking themselves out for only a quarter of a second, but that's an eternity when you're on the show. And so the guy just had the timing down to a science. And one of the categories was baseball, and he was beating me on the buzzer on the baseball category, and it drove me crazy. But I've also been on a show called Tic Tac Toe with Wink Martindale. There was a show called The Challengers that Dick Clark hosted, and a show called The $128,000 Answer, I think it was, that was taped up in Toronto, and Alex Trebek was the host for that as well. And my sister and I got on that show. They flew us up to Toronto to tape it, but they didn't put us in, they didn't slot us in the round of shows that were being taped in time to get our show taped during that round. So they said, we'll bring you back the next taping, which would be 2 months later. And in between that,
You heard so many great things about working with Alex Trebek when he passed away. You know, how was it dealing with him when you were
well,
on the
he
show?
called me weird, and I still haven't gotten over it. My twin sister went on Jeopardy in 1990, and I coached her. I gave her what I thought was a very clever saying about Jeopardy to say during the interview portion. And my sister said it very slowly instead of very fast. So it came out sounding a little strange. I taught her to say, Jeopardy, the show that gives you the answer, which is really the question in the form of an answer. You have to answer the answer, which is really the question in the form of an answer, with a question, which is really the answer in the form of a question. And she said it so slowly, it took her 3 minutes to complete it. And at the end of her recitation, Alex Trebek, because she had told him, well, my twin sister taught me this thing to say about Jeopardy. And when she said it, he listened, and then he looked at her and he said, tell your sister she's weird. 17 years later, I got vindication because I went to a taping at the studio. I wasn't on the show, but you can get tickets and go to a taping. And Alex Trebek talks to the audience in between, segments. And he came out, and I had my iPad all ready to go. And I stood up and I said, Alex, could I say something? And he said, sure. And I said, my sister was on Jeopardy in 1990, and she said this saying, and you called me weird because she said it wrong, and I'd like a chance to redeem myself. Could I say it now? So I said it then, and Alex Trebek listened to me say it, my mouth running on a mile a minute. And when I was finished, he looked at me and he said, Perry, you're still weird. So I've never gotten over that. Alex Trebek calling me weird, but life goes on. I miss him terribly. He was, Jeopardy for so long.
Perry, you mentioned Alex Trebek. Did you mean to say initially with Art Fleming?
Yes, I
okay.
Champion.
Yes.
And by the way, I got Don Pardo his job on Saturday Night Live.
Thank you, Don Pardo.
Yeah. I did, seriously, because the summer of 1975, I was dating Lorne Michaels, the producer of Saturday Night Live, before it went on the air. And he liked to go to this place called Elaine's that was a big, hangout back then in my neighborhood, 82nd and 2nd Avenue. And I would go there and meet him every night except for Tuesday nights, because in 1975, Jeopardy was on only on Tuesday nights. It had been reduced to a weeknight show once a week on Tuesday nights. And 1975, I didn't have a VCR. So I just told him, I'm not going to go out to dinner with you on Tuesday nights. And he said, well, look, if you want to watch Jeopardy, come over and watch it at my house, and then we'll go out and eat afterwards. So he started watching Jeopardy with me, and he just fell madly in love with Don Pardo and hired him. And Don Pardo's job lasted 35 years, and my romance with Lorne lasted 2 months. So I think he got the better deal out of that. Seriously. And he never thanked me either.
Great story.
I don't even think he knew. So, but I feel responsible for his having landed that gig. So
Any other questions for Perry?
Don't ask me anything about my sordid past, please.
Bill, did you have a question, Bill?
No.
Oh, okay. Anybody else?
May I
Mars,
just say a couple
Mars,
of
your thing's not working.
I just want to say a couple of things, Gary, before
Sure.
I sign. I am now working on a project to get what will be only the second woman inducted into the Hall of Fame. Her name is Maud Nelson, and we are embarking upon a campaign to get her name positioned front and center in front of the Historical Overview Committee of the Hall of Fame, which is the gatekeepers who hand the list of 10 names from players from the golden years, which is Maud's
Golden era.
and the early days, which is Maud's era, pre-1950. They're combining two eras this year, so everybody has 50% of the chance that they had last year, unfortunately, but that's the way it's happening. So if you hear the name Maud Nelson, or think of it, talk about her, think about her, because she is a remarkable person and she has the creds to get in, even though she was not technically a major league player, but her influence extended all the way through Reggie Jackson, because she taught one of her ball players that she trained and recruited, taught dance at Arizona State in the 1960s, and she taught Reggie Jackson agility skills that probably somebody else mimicked Reggie Jackson. And so Maud's influence is vast and very extensive, and she really is a great candidate, and I'm hoping that everybody will be talking about her by next December. And the other thing is, thank you so much for listening to me talk about umpiring, particularly, because it's not specifically a Giants thing. But if you know of any women or young girls or young women, or even middle-aged women, I didn't start till I was 28, encourage them to explore sports officiating. Say, hey, you've got a great attitude. I think you'd make a good umpire, because that's how the change is going to happen, how that type of outreach is going to become normalized, and women are going to be drawn to the diamond routinely instead of, one at a time here and there every once in a while, which is the way it's been happening for the last 100 years. So thank you all for your support, and just be nice to the umpires. We're not trying to make mistakes out there. We're trying to do our best. And
So what did Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball, and Bob Hope say? Nobody likes the ump.
no, they said nobody loves.
Nobody loves the
Nobody loves. Nobody loves. Nobody loves the ump.
Give it up for
Yeah,
Perry
I've seen that
Barber.
episode a million times.
Great job.
Perry, thank you so much.
Thank you for putting up with my technological failures here.
You know what? I honestly, once you got past that, we love hearing from you. And
Oh, thank you.
pictures are great. You were wonderful with your
I'm
stories.
lucky.
Yeah.
I'm lucky you let me
Great,
grab on.
great life that you led. Yes.
Yeah, very
Hey.
diversified with all the things you did.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm very lucky, and I'm lucky to have friends like I see here. Everybody.
A license
Thank
plate
you
that
so
says
much.
Big Six.
Yeah, and Gary, thank you so much for keeping us all together and putting these programs together. It really is, for me, it's just really important to stay in touch and to stay in communication with people that I care about. And that's what this is more than anything for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep this thing going, and so far we've been lucky. I've been lucky enough to get some wonderful people, you included, and we're gonna go forward. So we're gonna keep.
Luck is the residue of design.
There you go, Lee.
Who said that?
By the way, Gary, one last thing.
Sure.
During the technological snafu, I went through TCM. The big leaguer will not be on this month, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be on early in March, and I'll let you know in an email, because that has Edward G. Robinson and and I think Carl Hubble, and it is
cool.
And it is taken. I actually own it. It is filmed at the Sanford, Florida minor league complex, and it came out in '53. Vera Ellen is works for the team. She was billed as the woman with no waist.
White Christmas.
But I don't think he's very good, but it's certainly at least a character piece so anyway, I think it's early March, and I'll let you know. And at midnight this Saturday and Saturday morning at 10 is the horror film about New York in 1950.
Failsafe?
It will be introduced by the great Eddie Muller, and it's the monster that ate New York in 1950 with 5 women and 1 man. So,
You mentioned Joe West earlier. Was he supportive, and if he, besides Joe West, was any other Major League umpire supportive of women in umpiring Major League games?
There are quite a few that are. Hunter Wendelstedt told me he wants to be the one to put the first woman into the major leagues. And I've known him for as long as I've been umpiring. He was a little kid when I first went to his dad's school. And, you know, there's some that are still just never going to change their attitudes and think that women shouldn't be out there for one reason or another, usually pretty bogus reasons, frankly. But they just can't be convinced. Even if a woman was the greatest out there, they still would find a reason to, you know.
It's going to happen, though. It's going to happen.
No, I think it's going to happen with 2 or 3 on NPR
That's what I'm
tonight.
hoping.
They interviewed on NPR tonight a woman. There are 5 in the NBA.
There are 7. Oh, right, you're right. 5 right now.
And the first one was interviewed, and she said life is so much easier for her now that it's expected, you know, or can they do the job? It's the content of the character and the ability, not preconditions of servitude. So,
thank you. It is
Say
right.
Lee, Vera Ellen, White Christmas, right?
Yeah, and also On the Town.
Okay.
Right, On the Town.
Right.
Bronx is
Good job, Gary.
batteries down.
Gut feeling, Perry, as to when we might see a female umpire in the major league? Do you have any, you know?
She said about 5-6 years.
About 5-6 years?
2025, 26, 2026, probably at the earliest.
I think that
I hope I'm alive by then to see it.
Do you have your assignments yet for spring training?
No, because I'm an independent contractor, and I either just call an equipment manager or they call me. So I keep my calendar clear for the last couple of weeks of February because I can get a game the night before sometimes. So I like to keep it clear. But I've got games scheduled all the way through next November already. So
I think it's very
I'm tired of sitting around on my tickets.
It's very, very apparent that you are a role model for all the ladies entering officiating.
Well, I don't know about that, but my focus now is on doing exactly what somebody just said about making the path easier. Was that you, Steve, that said that? Yeah, carving out a path so that women who come after me or come after the women that are working now don't have to fight.
Pay the dues.
The way they won't
Harry,
struggle.
Can you talk about your interview with Brian Kenny on MLB?
Oh yeah, I've known Brian for a long time. He was friends with a cousin of mine, and he and his wife Nicole actually stayed in my apartment in New York before I even knew them. Their daughter was dancing in the Nutcracker at Lincoln Center a long time ago, and they stayed in my apartment. And I remember I was down here in Florida, and Nicole called me on the phone, and she said, "Perry, I was sitting on the toilet and water came gushing out of the wall." And I said, "What am I supposed to do about it? I'm 1,200 miles away." So that was the auspicious start of our relationship. But Brian later in 1996 recommended me for a job as his color analyst partner for a small upstate New York operation called RNN, where he did play-by-play for the Hudson Valley Renegades for a few years. And I was his partner in the booth, and it was, I just loved it. That was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I learned so much from him. And he's just been a great pal and very supportive. And, you know, every once in a while, he'll say, I think it's time you should come on the show and talk about what's happening with women's baseball. And I'll say, yeah, I think so. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing that this summer, talking about Maud Nelson and another project that the IWBC is working on, which is building a girls and women's baseball museum in Rockford, Illinois, across the street from where the Rockford Peaches played. So.
Earlier that the gateway in the NBA and the NFL is through the college ranks to become a female umpire. So in major leagues, if women got involved and was spearheaded that they should umpire college games, that should be their gateway into the major leagues, correct?
Yes, and the problem with that is the same as on every level. The recruitment and the outreach is not there yet. There's no mechanism to actually go out and identify viable candidates, women candidates. And there isn't even really for men. It's just whoever shows up at the umpire school, which to me has always been absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's the pool from which you're getting major league umpires. It's not people who have been scouted and singled out and marked as competent and coachable and, you know, able to progress to the level of skill that they'll need. That's not what's happening. It's just guys that have the money and the time who show up at umpire school, and some of them get jobs and some don't, and very seldom are those guys women. So that is the big impediment, is the outreach, the recruitment. And that's what I'm working on changing, is setting up a mechanism so that there's a pipeline to draw girls and women to the diamond, you know, not just as umpires, but as ball players and coaches and other personnel. And it's happening. It's slowly coming together, but it's happening. So thank you for the encouragement.
Terry, thanks again from everybody here.
Yeah.
Everybody else, have a great night. Hopefully we'll see some of you next week.
Thank you.
With our giant show.